Frank Ocean is one of the most legendary artists of our time. His songwriting, vocals, and his unique blend of R&B, pop, hip-hop, and alternative sounds are amazing. But behind his amazing vocals and songwriting, there's one thing that acts as the backbone to his legendary status: the genius production behind his records. So today, we're gonna make it 100% original Frank Ocean style song from start to finish, instrumentals, vocals, mixing, and all, going over all the techniques used in his sounds. So whether you make alternative R&B or hard trap beats, there's gonna be a ton of gems and unique techniques in this video that you can apply to your production, regardless of the genre. So sit back and get ready to go into the euphoric, nostalgic, and unique world of Frank Ocean's production. Frank Ocean is known to start out a lot of his songs with his Wurlitzer electric piano, because starting ideas with instruments like piano, guitar, or electric piano can be a super good way to get the bare bones idea of the song off the ground before you go in and start adding in a bunch of instrumentation, cool synth leads, drums, etc. Anyways, take a listen to some examples of Frank using his Wurlitzer. Both these songs are amazing, but I think the best example of this starting out with electric piano kind of workflow is Good Guy, which almost sounds like it's a voice note that Frank took in the studio, just kind of sitting there playing the electric piano and singing at the same time.
It's a good guy, he hooked it up.
So, taking inspiration from those records to start out our song, I grabbed the Whirly V from Arturia, and then I came up with this smooth chord progression that I'll break down in a second. This chord progression is actually pretty simple until you get to those last two chords where we have two chords that are going out of key. And for this last chord especially, I used a technique that you can hear in the chord progression of Thinking About You, where the last chord goes fully out of key and borrows a chord from a nearby scale, which creates this really weird feeling and kind of tension in the music. But then when it loops back to start the progression over again, it resolves on that root chord of the progression, and it sounds great.
California, much like Arizona, my eyes don't shed.
So like I said, the chord progression is pretty simple, so we're just gonna recreate it right here. So the first thing it is a major 7 chord. It is a A flat major 7 chord, which the way I like to think about it is if you just delete this note, it's a C minor, and then you put one note, 4 notes down, you get this, right? So that's the main chord for this progression. That goes for about 2 bars. And then we drop down 5. So we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this major 7 chord going down 5 to another major 7 chord is really what gives like the main euphoric kind of sound. This progression is great for that. Now, I took this and duplicated it over right here. And then to change up this last bit right here, I wanted to go out of key like you can hear on a lot of his chord progressions. So the first thing that I wanted to do is change this from a major 7 chord to a minor 7th chord. And if we get rid of this note right here, we have a G minor chord. So then I just extend that from a minor chord to a minor 7th chord by adding in the 4th note. But this isn't out of key yet. It sounds like this. Pretty similar to this, because they're sharing a lot of the same notes. It's really just this top note that's changing and this bottom note right here. Then to make this one a little bit more jazzy, a little bit more out of key, you move this note up 1 to this B that is out of key when we're in C minor, and you get this chord. Sounds a little bit more interesting than this. And then finally, we go super out of key right here by taking this G minor 7th chord and putting it up 2 to start on A. And A is out of the scale. That's in the scale of A minor now. But as you can see, it still works because these notes right here are still using some of the same notes as the main chord in our progression. So on that last chord, we're borrowing a chord from another scale. But then when it resolves back into this chord, it sounds good. Take a listen how it resolves back when it loops. Little weird and uneasy feeling, but it resolves nicely. Now that we got the chords down, I want to go over another aspect of Frank's production that I love on songs like Lens and Nights. A kind of sporadic, disjointed kind of sound. If you listen to Lens especially, you can hear these really random kind of moments where there's just different instruments that come in and do a little piece of ear candy and then stop immediately after that.
back home with that next time.
I wanted to add that same kind of vibe to our song, and I did that by using synths and another electric piano preset. So let's hop into the screen and I'll break down how I made those little ear candy bits. For this first accent, what I did is I played the same chords and messed around with the notes that we were using in the chord progression, but I used the UAD Electra 88 keys, which is a Rhodes plugin, and I played these like loose high chord sprinkles. Sound like this. Super nice and dreamy. And I just kind of played like not really thinking too much about how everything made sense, because what I did is I bounced that to audio, and then I only took these little chops and just kind of chopped silence in here and there to make it a little bit more simple and add to that like stop and go kind of sound. So you get this little accent right here. Then this one's reversed. Then for the next little ear candy sound, I've got this crazy lead that I played on my Moog Matriarch that sounds like this. Super weird, chaotic. There's not like a chord melody to it. And then as you can see, I ended up just chopping these two little parts of that so that we get that stop and go sound, and it also simplifies the pattern a little bit. And if you're wondering how I got that kind of like weird, trippy, pitch bending sound to the lead, the Moog actually has a crazy delay on it, but it's gonna be easier for me to show you what I did just opening up my ToneFlex plugin and a little VST lead right here, right? So this is what the lead sounds like normally. What I did is I turned the delay to max, right? So it's already got the nice little delay sound, but the way that you get it to sound really weird and trippy is you move the delay time as you're playing it. So you can automate this in on your delay plugins, or if you've got a real synth, move the knob as you're playing it. As you move the delay time, the pitch will start to change, or this warp knob is a good example too. One last thing I wanted to take some inspiration from for these little ear candy accents was the chaotic transition that you can hear before the beat switch on Nights. It almost sounds like the song is stuck in a feedback loop, like when you accidentally have the delay repeating over and over and over again, but it sounds sick. So I wanted to add that kind of rising feedback loop sound into this melody, almost to act as like a riser for every 16 bars to transition into the next section. So for this last accent, I ended up playing the chords on a synth and then putting it through this backwards tape preset, which does this really cool thing where it's like delaying and reversing it and also adds like that guitar amp kind of texture. So now this sounds like some weird, trippy kind of guitar sound. And as you can see, I chopped these up pretty simple. And on this last one, for that cool rising delay feedback kind of effect, what I did is I turned on the freeze on the delay. So this essentially freezes the delay in a feedback loop, doing the same thing over and over again. I'm using the ToneFlex delay right here with these settings. And then I also automated the mix to turn it off, because whenever the feedback loop is going, it'll just keep going and going forever. Take a listen to what it sounds like without that delay feedback. Just ends right there. With that feedback, you get some really interesting sounds. Now that we got those ear candy accents down, I wanted to show you another technique that I actually got put onto by my boy Loner, who did a Frank Ocean video as well. Essentially, you take your chord progression and you process each chord in the progression differently, which kind of adds to this like disjointed, sporadic kind of sound, because each new chord that plays has a different effect on it, and it makes it a lot more interesting without even adding new sounds. You can actually hear Frank using this technique on the guitar on Nights. If you listen closely and you pay attention, you can hear how it kind of sounds like it's a sample chopped from different parts of a song or two different songs stitched together. Just listen to how the effect on the guitar changes each new chord that comes in. So I use this technique on our Wurlitzer progression, and I'm going to break that down in the screen right now. So as you can see right here, I ended up chopping our Wurlitzer progression like crazy. Each one of these things right here is a different chord that's being played with different effects. And for this first one, I just have the VST with a little tape effect and a little distortion from my ToneFlex plugin, which sounds like this. Nice, clean kind of go-to tone. And then for the second chord, what I did is I sent the audio out into my pedal board and I added on tape echo as well as some saturation from my chroma console. And you get this for the second chord. And here it has like a more ambient sound and then it goes away. Right, back into second effect. And again, I'm using that, moving the delay time as I'm recording. I'm moving the pedals. I'm moving the knob on the pedal. You can hear like the delay kind of like goes out of tune just a little bit right here. That little glitch right there. And then finally for this last one, I used the Tone Flex plugin again, and this time I added on chorus and a tremolo that adds this super cool little vibe as well as a delay. And this effect was a little crazier, so I only used it at the end of the progression so it's not too overdone. By the way, if you like the effects that I just put on the Wurlitzer, as well as a bunch of those ear candy sounds that I was playing before, all those effects come from my new upcoming Tone Flex plugin, which emulates a ton of analog pedals and effects units. I'm hoping to drop the plugin soon. We're still developing it and making it perfect every single day. But if you want to make sure you stay updated on the release, maybe get a discount when we first launch it, click the link in the description down below to sign up for the waitlist. It'll be the first one in the description. But anyways, back into the video. The next thing I wanted to add was some sort of pitch gliding element. Frank uses these kind of sounds pretty often in his music, and I feel like this is the easiest way to get that transcending, euphoric, dreamlike kind of sound that Frank's music has a lot of the time. And one of these cool pitch bending moments that you can hear is on, I don't know how to pronounce this, I'll be real, Siegfried? I'm not sure. Let me know in the comments.
Maybe I should move.
And I didn't go for this exact sound that you hear on this record, but I grabbed a synth lead from Arturia's Juno emulation, which by the way, Frank Ocean's producer Male said that a lot of the synths on Channel Orange are actually the Arturia emulations of synths because he didn't have all the keyboards at the time.
Ocean, I couldn't afford any keyboards, so most of the stuff on Channel Orange is done with the Arturia stuff.
Anyways, I put down a lead from that plugin, and then I messed with the pitch wheel on my MIDI keyboard like crazy to give it that euphoric, almost siren sounding lead sound. Next up, I wanted to thicken up the chords a little bit, and I did this by adding a sound that you hear all over Frank's discography, synth pads. He uses a ton of legendary synths, including the Prophet 5 on songs like Thinking About You. So I hopped on my Prophet 10, which is pretty much the same thing as a Prophet 5, and played the same chords that I did on my Wurlitzer. And then to make it more unique and euphoric like Frank's music is, I put the synth recording through a guitar effects chain so that it has like this weird, dreamy kind of sound. And for anyone wondering, the guitar effects chain is just a stock Logic preset called Cascade, super fire. Now we've got a super solid foundation down, but we're missing an instrument that's crucial to Frank's sound, the guitar.
River, make it shine on the last night. Could we make it in? Do we have?
I thought that I was dreaming when you said you loved me.
So I played the same exact chords that we had written earlier on my guitar, and since I am by no means a good guitarist, or probably not even a decent guitarist, I cheated a bit by playing each chord one at a time and then just stitching the recordings together to kind of make it sound like I played it all in one take. And here's what those dry recordings sound like together. For the effects on the guitar, I wanted to keep it pretty simple because I like songs like Moon River where the guitar is super chill and it almost sounds kind of like the direct input sound of the guitar, just with a subtle amped kind of sound. So honestly, I just clicked around in the stock Logic guitar presets. They are so fire if you're on Logic. Until I found this Dubwise preset, which was perfect. And then also I recorded the guitar pretty high pitched. So I pitched the whole recording down an octave as well, which gave it a way more chill and intimate vibe. And also by pitching it down an octave, I left a ton of room in the high end for the synths and ear candy to shine. Take a listen to before and after. Next up, I wanted to fill out the low end with a bass. And to decide what kind of bass to use, I took a listen to Pyramids, where you can hear this super analog sounding bass line. While I was doing research for this video, I ended up watching Reverb's breakdown of all of Frank Ocean's gear. And in this video, they show that the bass on Pyramids comes from the Minimoog Model D, as you can see here.
So all of the saw waves are set to 3 different octaves, as you can see.
And I don't actually have the Model D in my studio, but I do have the Poly D, which is essentially the ripoff of the Model D. It's just an emulation of that, but an actual hardware synth form. So anyways, I sound designed a bass preset on that. That's a little bit more subtle and not as bright as the one on Pyramids, and got this for the bass line. Next up, I wanted to add something super important to that Frank Ocean sound. Texture. On Good Guy, you can hear this kind of hissing room sounding noise.
It's a good guy, he hooked it up.
That paired with the fact that this song just sounds like it's an iPhone voice note made me want to grab a room noise texture so that the listener kind of feels like they're in the studio with me as I'm playing these instruments. So I grabbed this room noise that I just recorded the background noise of my studio on for my Kit Vintage Essentials. And then for a few more textures, I've got a really fun technique that you can use to get custom textures that perfectly fit the song that you're working on. So we'll actually talk about the drums later, but while I was in this project file, I was just putting down some demo drums just so I could get the bounce going. And one of the things I did was put delay on the snare, which we'll talk about later. Right? And I really liked the tail end of that snare, like not the exact snare hit, but like the delay sound effect. Right, that. So what I did is I bounced that snare with the delay tail, and then I just dragged it in right in the beginning of the song as this cool little texture. Right? I used that same exact technique, just kind of taking the tail end of reverb or delays or whatever it is on stuff like the vocals and synths that I ended up adding later, made a few other textures with them. But anyways, all those textures with the guitar sound like this together. Another instrument I see Frank using across his music are violins and strings. So I wanted to add that into this idea, but in a subtle way. Almost just using it as a pad to fill out the melody, not really doing a bunch of crazy violin riffs or anything like that. So I went into my Vintage Essentials kit, which has this super fire folder of live violin chord one-shots. I pieced together those chord one-shots to follow the progression that we made, and you get this. Now that we have that, the first main section of the melody is done. But I wanted to add a higher energy synth section like the one you can hear on Nights. This part of the song is so fire. So to get a similar vibe going, I went back to my Prophet 10, and instead of just playing the chords on my Prophet with a different preset, I ended up just finding a preset that I like that has that kind of bright synthy sound like the one on Nights, and I just recorded one C note to make a one shot that I could use in the computer with MIDI. Reason being, those synth chords were too hard to play and also move the pitch wheel to get that pitch gliding kind of sound like the ones you can hear on Nights. Since I wasn't able to play the chords with two hands and move the pitch wheel all at the same time, I thought it would just be easier to put the one shot in the DAW and then automate in the pitch gliding later. So I loaded that one shot into Logic's quick sampler, copied the chord progression, and then used the pitch wheel on my MIDI controller to really sauce it up. All right, so if we look at this chord progression right here, you can see that I'm doing a lot of pitch bending. It's not just a subtle little thing. So when it's at 0, it's where the notes are normally right here in the MIDI. And when it's all the way down here at -64, it's down a full octave. So it's playing the same chord chord that it would be, but it's just doing it a whole octave lower. And if you notice, some of the MIDI notes move around quite a bit. Like there's some really high notes right here and right here. You can see the inversions are kind of moving around a lot. But I did that on purpose. See right here, the pitch goes down a full octave on the pitch bend. So when I had all these notes down in a lower octave, it sounded too muddy and there wasn't enough like high end present. And then right here, when I go back up to the normal pitch, I had to bring some of those notes down because they were too high when everything goes back up to the higher octave. But anyways, here's what it sounds like. Since the section we're working on right now has more energy, a lot more energy now that we added in those synth chords, I kind of wanted the bass to reflect that as well, and I wanted it to be more in your face and bright, kind of like the one that you can hear on the bridge section on Pyramids. So I grabbed this bass preset from Omnisphere, put it through some distortion and chorus from my Tone Flex plugin, as well as an EQ that boosts the high end just a little bit, adds some more of that like fuzzy bass kind of sound, and paired with the chords, you get this. Next up, just to add a little bit more grit and texture, I took some inspiration from the distorted little texture that you can hear in the background on Slide On Me. That distorted radio sounding texture is super sick. So to get a similar vibe, I bounced the whole entire song that I was working on at this point. That actually has the vocals that we're going to be doing later on in the video. But anyways, I pitched the whole entire song up an octave and then distorted the fuck out of it. Added a guitar amp and an EQ that's kind of filtering the low end and the high end. Bunch of reverb, and finally turned it way down and then layered it in under all the elements that we already have going in the song. Another really cool sound that you can hear on Frank Ocean's production is the vocal line that almost sounds like a synth or guitar lead on Self Control. So I wanted to do something similar in our song, and it's actually not too hard to do. I ended up taking the lead vocal that I wrote later on in this video and put it through a super distorted guitar amp preset that also pitches the audio up an octave, gives it this really high energy, high pitch kind of sound. Finally, to finish off this hook section, I wanted to have it build up in a unique way. And one thing that caught my attention when I was listening to Pyramids again was that the song has this kind of like tape slowing down effect whenever it transitions from that first main section into the bridge section. Almost like a tape stop effect, but not completely stopping. Because if you don't already know, on reel-to-reel tape machines, if you slow down the speed of the tape, the pitch goes down with the speed. But anyways, that gave me a little idea to use that kind of tape start, tape stop effect to make an interesting riser into our hook section. All right, so what I did for this is I bounced out the whole song that I was working on at that point. Right? So I bounced everything. The drum demo that I had, the vocals, everything. And then I took this last chord right here. The last chord that plays before everything resolves and the new section starts. And I put this tape start effect where it starts slow like this. And that rises perfectly and resolves into the chords right here. So then I layered that again, this time up an octave, and I threw on a very, very heavy distortion right here. Pretty much got the drive and gain turned all the way up to make it sound like it's breaking up, super gritty. And it sounds sick. Next up, for one more section of the melody, I wanted to take some inspiration from Novocaine, where you can hear these chords that kind of have this like pulsing, more rhythmic kind of sound to them. They're not like just super drawn out ambient chords. So I found this super cool preset in Arturia's Oberheim emulation that has a bunch of movement and rhythm to it. And I just copied the chord progression onto that, and you get this. I also took some inspiration from that Siegfried song. Siegfried? I don't know. Because you can hear a more live sounding bass. So I grabbed my bass guitar and played that bass line, but on the live bass. And with all that, all the melodic elements of the song are done. So it's time to move on to the vocals and the drums. And first off, I want to go into the vocals. And I want to say that my vocals are not going to compare at all to Frank Ocean's vocals because I'm by no means a singer. But when I do come up with vocals, I normally spend a bit of time just humming out melodies with the track on loop and recording just whatever I end up freestyling. And then once I find flows and melodic ideas that I like, I just let those like humming recordings keep looping and I write lyrics to them. And once I'm sold on the lyrics, I record the lead vocal, singing those new lyrics. And then Frank Ocean uses a lot of layering in his vocals, especially on songs like Moon River. So I dubbed this lead vocal a few times so that it clearly sounds like there's multiple vocals singing the same thing, as well as doing some more background vocals that are just doing some oohs and ahs, harmonies and stuff in the background. And with all that plus some effects, you get this for the vocal. Losing control. Wonder when the day will come that I could do this shit on my own. Who's in control? It's fuck the world, fuck the people who got me doing shit on my own. I wasn't too sold on that, to be honest. I feel like my voice just doesn't have the right texture and sound to it to sound convincing for a Frank Ocean vibe. So I put my voice through a male R&B voice filter and layered that back in with my vocals just to make it sound a little bit more authentic. And this is what you get for the final vocals that I ended up using.
How many wasted days till the time's gone? Bring me back to the days when I had you around. The things I do just to go ahead and turn back time.
Once I had that, I exported the melody and the vocals separately and dragged those both into FL Studio to finish the drums. And a little side note, I've been getting a ton of comments asking why I'm using FL Studio for drums, and you'll have to let me know if you agree with this in the comments. But Logic is where I learned to produce, and I feel like I'm most comfortable there doing advanced stuff like processing the audio, doing weird things, trying cool effects and all this kind of stuff. And I found that it's a lot easier to work with audio, especially recording stuff like synths and all that in Logic. But the workflow of making drums in FL is just way better. Having the file browser right there, I feel like I just make better drums when I'm in FL. Anyways though, back into the song. I wanted to do some super simple drums on this one because the melody's already doing a lot. So I took inspiration from songs like Lens and Nike, and on both of these songs, you can actually hear delay on the kicks and snares.
I feel they smiles on me.
Delay on those drums adds so much character and just a unique kind of sound to these drums, and you don't really hear people doing that too much in modern music. So I had to add that to our project. Okay, so as you can see, we have a kick and a snare, but to make it a little bit more complicated, we added that delay on the kick like that, and the delay on the snare like that. So they have pretty much the same delay on them, so I'll just break down one of them. Essentially what I did is I went into my ToneFlex plugin and I put it to 16th note delay. So it's a super fast delay because you want this to sound like a slapback kind of delay. And then to make it sound more like an analog space echo kind of delay, I turned the saturation on the delay up. Without it, it sounds like that. So somewhere in the middle like that. And then that same effect on the kick as well. And then as you can see right here with the kick, I also put the second one lower, so it has a different sound. And then we have the delayed kick right here. First time it plays at a low velocity, so it's a little bit more subtle. And then the second time it comes in more aggressively to end the pattern off. And then the snare, I have the main snare playing every single time, and then that delayed snare comes in every other snare. And the same thing where first time the delayed snare is just this subtle little texture in the background, right? This last time it's louder. Next up, for the hook section on the song, I wanted the drums to pick up just a little bit, kind of to reflect what's going on with the melody. And after listening to Frank's music, I thought it would be dope to add a live hi-hat loop in, similar to the ones on Pink and White and Lost. So I grabbed this simple live hi-hat loop from the vintage folder inside of Drum Mastery, and this is what it sounds like with our drums. For that third section where the more rhythmic pad comes in that we added in earlier, I wanted to take some inspiration from the second beat on Pyramids as well as the drums on Nights, where you can hear these more trappy 808 drum machine sounding hi-hats.
Whip ain't got no gas tank, but it still got wood.
So I grabbed a hi-hat from the drum mastery kit and put down this simple hi-hat pattern that just kind of follows what the live hi-hat break is doing. Once I had that, the song was almost finished. But I wanted to add one more final detail as I was listening to Moon River. The attention to detail on one super subtle part of the song is a great testament to how much thought and intention goes into Frank's music. Assuming this was intentional, I don't know. Anyways, when Frank sings two drifters, that vocal take is doubled, almost like it's two voices saying that at the same time. And then as soon as that two drifters part is over, it goes back to just the one lead vocal.
Two drifters.
Little details like that add up, and I feel like it also makes it more enjoyable the more you listen to his music. You just hear these little things that you may not have noticed when you were listening for the first time. So anyways, I wanted to add something like that was a subtle detail that most people wouldn't get. And after listening to the song for a while, I realized that there was this part of a vocal where I said, I wish I could turn back time, and that sparked an idea. I could reverse the drums to almost sound like a rewind kind of sound effect, similar to how Frank actually did it on the drums on Pyramids. So I took the kick and snare as well as a trappy hi-hat sound, reversed all those and added a few effects with my Tone Flex plugin. Then I added in a rewind sound effect just to kind of really bring together this whole turning back time kind of thing and giving it some more life. And you'll hear that in just a second when I play the full song through. But real quick, if you learned anything from this video, hit that subscribe button for me and let's listen to this final track.
Losing control. Wonder when the day comes that I can do this shit on my own. Losing control.
Quick reminder, I use my upcoming plugin Tone Flex as the effect on a ton of layers inside of this project. If you like how stuff is sounding, make sure you sign up for the Tone Flex waiting list, first link in the description down below. But that's it for me. Peace.